Arc 6, Chapter 76. The Hell Bearing the Name of Oneself. With the young girl who had experienced return by death and was sobbing with her hands on her head before his eyes, Natsuki Subaru intently stared at his own palm. It was not as if he was feeling hurt after having been called a monster, after having been spoken ill of. That he was crazy, that it was impossible to withstand, he agreed with those notions as well. Subaru himself had died countless times until now. He was aware of something as basic as those experiences being unordinary, but he had simply gritted his teeth and endured it, believing with all his heart that it would be better for him to suffer than the death of someone aside from himself, a friend or an acquaintance, people whose names and faces he did not know, his precious comrades or the people he loved. That was Subaru. Yeah, I sure am amazing, right, Natsuki Subaru? Tightly clenching the fist he had been gazing, Subaru sang his own praises from the bottom of his heart. He had been commended, through loose-lipped logic impossible to be held true. Such words had been used as if to console oneself, or for encouraging oneself. However, the singing his own praises just now had been different. The memories and real experience which had observed the existence named Natsuki Subaru terribly objectively were commending the path oneself had walked until now. Subaru, dang, I'm unexpectedly a pretty big deal, huh? And that was something which Natsuki Subaru, who had lost his memories and had returned to the starting point of being summoned into the different world, and ultimately reached this point after taking a deep read of the books of the dead, could also be told. Starting from being ignorant with regards to the different world, accumulating personal experiences of death sufficient to equal the single-year Subaru had lived through, and had returned without letting his heart shatter into pieces, impressively. Thanks to that, the lost memories and the memories thereafter had been unified. Subaru, Meili, Shala, entrusted to me, and I will take responsibility for them. Meili, for whom murder had become a habit, and had locked herself into a dark future. Shala, who had been liberated from a vain wait which lasted for 400 years and wished to continue the blessed present. Subaru, Ram and Julius, both of them sure act unreasonably. For those two to be doing that, that's quite a feat. Ram, who already knew the best possible option and displayed prudence more reliable than anyone. Julius, who had lost his own resort, yet embraced faith and still resumed holding the sword. Subaru, Beatrice and Echidna, I've really been a bother to them as well. Geez, I'm such a... Beatrice, who dedicatedly supported Subaru and noticed the limits of his heart before anyone else. Echidna, who was utmost suspicious regarding Subaru's amnesia and had granted him forgiveness at its extremity. And, no matter if he lost his memories, no matter how many times he redid, he ultimately returned to the path of being drawn towards you. He wanted to do that. He must do that. He could not think of any other path. That is how much you are Subaru, EMT. With love and certain tranquility on his lips, Subaru raised his face and looked at Louie, who still had her face covered and was shivering. Subaru, hey, Louie, eek hick. Subaru, you're too scared. Subaru scratched his cheek with a single finger upon her being excessively frightened by a single call. She was a young girl with an outward appearance which could unobjectionably be called young. The form of that young girl shivering in fear, desperately rejecting the world, was a sight heavy to the chest. It seemed she had been endowed with something akin to fleeting fragility which would make one thoughtlessly extend a hand to her, by birth. Surely an attainment of the nature to undo the opponent's vigilance and crawling into their interior. That could perhaps be a crystal pure like a child that had been coercively refined. That Louis Arneb, who did not know of the world, was like an innocent, pure child. However, Subaru, Louis Arneb you lose. Natsuki Subaru shall not forgive Louis Arneb, who was sobbing like a child. Louis widened her eyes, frozen, upon the verification of defeat that had been slammed right before her. Whilst witnessing fear fill her eyes like ink spilled on a white sheet, Subaru's heart yet remained peaceful like the calm at sea. The world was not filled with problems that could be ignored simply because of not knowing, and the deeds Louis or her siblings had committed were countless inhuman and demonic atrocities. It was not as if she did not get a chance to know. Through the memories of others, she must have also had a chance to come in contact with human emotions, likes and dislikes, and learn from them. However, what she absorbed from there was not something akin to affection for others, but a further dusky, grisly desire, and the conduct of trampling upon and spitting on the effortful lives of others. Perhaps the fault was that of her teachers. Her elder brothers had been bad role models of her life. However, it was her decision to never use any chance to return back from the mistaken path. Subaru, you may know as well if you were a part of me, but the ranks which you all, sin archbishops, name yourself, as is common with the 7 deadly sins. 7 deadly sins is a pretty English term for Chunabiu purveyors, but there also exist the 7 heavenly virtues, which are something close it. The 7 deadly sins: pride, envy, wrath, gluttony, sloth, lust, greed. And the 7 heavenly virtues: chastity, humility, temperance, patience, diligence, charity, kindness. If the 7 deadly sins were karma impossible to be sundered from humans as long as they live, then these were 7 conventions which mustn't be forgotten in order for humans carrying the burden of those sins to live with others. Because they respect that humans can live with other humans. Subaru, but you violated that. That is why the sin archbishops, Louis Arneb, had become an unforgivable great evil. Louis, eek, eek, eek. The frightened, curled-up Louis was struck with Subaru's words and was shivering as if she had experienced agony. The slightest effort of others, of the world, connected to fear. Subaru was also aware of that sensation, having tasted the otherworldly sensation called return by death, in a situation of not knowing how to surmount the obstacle, however much one may die. Even the sound of dry leaves swaying in the breeze seemed fatal to life. Because he remembered that feeling akin to the soul being frozen, Subaru closed his eyes. And Subaru, Louis Arneb, you lose. Subaru, so recognize that and release anything and everything. Once again, Subaru repeated her defeat such that she could hear it herself. On top of that, he pushed a firm demand toward the young girl, who remained silent upon hearing that. The return of Subaru's own memories was due to the chance meeting between Natsuki Subaru, who lost his memories, and Natsuki Subaru of the moment immediately previous to his memories being robbed, since his advance through the different world was replayed in the books of the dead. He was able to restore his own memories in the form of tracing them back, in the form of re-experiencing the stolen memories by utilizing the books of the dead. And fulfilling the unification of Subaru before and after losing memories, the result was the successful second advent of Natsuki Subaru. As its byproduct, Louis, who had gotten into Subaru in the form of a witch factor, had been forced out as a foreign substance. However, Subaru had witnessed with his own eyes her self-indulgent treatment of the stolen memories of freely bringing them out and peeling them off. If that was possible, then a method to save the people who had their memories, their names robbed, would be Subaru. If we think of doing it, then we can do anything, is what you said, right? Then, from being conceited and bragging about her own abilities, she had even succeeded in a stunt like splitting the witch factor into 2. Since she had achieved that, then surely it wasn't impossible for her to cancel out the effects of her own authority. If that alone could come true, then perhaps it would be possible to recover the people who got their memories and names stolen, to recover Rem. Subaru, then release all of the people you've eaten up until now. If you do that, Louis, do that, then what? Subaru articulated powerfully, but Louis shortly intercepted that voice. Louis remained on white floor in the posture of pulling her knees towards herself, making her long golden hair spreading out on the floor blanket herself. She was glaring at Subaru through the gaps of her hair. What dwelled in her eyes was the sole unquestionable hue of fear. Louis, do that, then what? Repeating, Louis piled up the same question yet again. Subaru had been caught off guard by her retort for a moment, but got a hold of himself immediately after she displayed her stance of conversation. Far better than her not talking due to fear. He must accept the words head-on and fumble around for a compromise plan that could change the situation. Subaru, release the great number of people you have eaten. If the names return, then even the honor of the people who have already died can be restored. The people who are alive can even reunite with their families. If you would do that, then I will let you, Louis, off the hook, you say. If we do that, then Oni-san will let us off the hook. Off the hook, you say. His words intercepted yet again. Subaru felt daunted. Viewing that reaction of Subaru's, Louis said, "Ha," and opened her mouth bearing sharp fangs. Louis. That can't be, isn't it? That isn't possible. Energetically lifting her face, Louis shouted with a blazing glint in her eyes. Her two eyes glaring at Subaru, they immutably remained soaked in fear, twinkling darkly. With those dark twinkles in her eyes, Louis forcefully rocked her body back and forth. Louis. It isn't. It really isn't. It isn't after all. It indeed isn't. We're telling you it isn't, as we know it isn't, that's why. Oni-san will not let us off the hook. Absolutely certainly. After all, Louis, Oni-san destroys his enemies. Absolutely crushes them until the very end of the end. Without any exception, completely thoroughly. Closes it with a perfect game. He can do that. Then there's no way he wouldn't do that. There's no point in him not doing that. As if having heard a first-class joke, Louis ended her silence and let her emotions explode. And to Subaru, Louis' outbursting form was visible as terribly distant minute. Louis' facial expression was disordered, trying to laugh, trying to be angered, trying to be doleful, and baffled by the notation of fear not present in any of those. She was perplexed and was imploring. The gateways of all of Louis' surging emotions, all directly connected to fear, regardless of whether they began with delight, rage, or sadness. Knowing that all would ultimately lead to fear, for what should she be delighted, be enraged, be saddened? Even if she were to believe, that conclusion led to fear as well. Subaru was more than sufficiently aware of the ingrained nature of Louis' rejection. Cursing the entirety of the world, being flung into a storm of suspicion and distrust, becoming trapped in a sensation of being forbid into the slightest movement. That was the hell named oneself, which Natsuki Subaru had also experienced. What pulled Subaru out of that hopeless hell was surely because there had been someone who held his hand, and that warmth never let go of Subaru. That was the silver-haired young girl who had saved Subaru's life, his heart when he had first arrived in the different world. That was the dressed young girl who strived to protect Subaru when he had been betrayed by anything and everything. That was the blue-haired young girl who gently made Subaru realize when he sought to abandon everything. That was the reason why Natsuki Subaru had remained without being prisoned in hell. That foundation of heart was not possessed by Louis Arneb, who was drowned in fear before his eyes. That is why she did not possess the ability to conquer fear. She could never think of return by death other than being a nightmarish curse of being dragged into an inescapable hell. Though quite a cliched expression, humans cannot live by themselves. That is why, for her to be saved, she, who was caged in fear, it was necessary for someone to extend their hand to her. Someone offering their hand just as Subaru had been offered once. However, Subaru, I will not save you. Subaru shall not extend his hand to Louis Arneb. Louis, ah, Subaru, I will not save you, neither will I pity you. Louis Arneb, the sin archbishop of gluttony, the blasphemer of souls standing in the white world. Not matter how sweet an appearance, no matter how miserable and transient an ambience, no matter how luring an attitude of craving being sheltered by adults were she to possess, Subaru shall not forgive her. The sin archbishops had committed sins difficult to forgive. That was the conclusion Natsuki Subaru had derived. Subaru, I'm sure no matter what I say, it'll never prove to be salvation for you in the first place. Louis, eek. Louis' distended eyes were filled with naught but terror toward Subaru. In this place, though only Subaru could understand the fear she bore, the very reason for her fear was Subaru himself. In other words, her labyrinth couldn't possibly be opened up. And upon Subaru's head-on declaration that we won't save her, that he detested her, Louis stabbed her claws into the shapeless white world, and whilst desperately distancing herself away from Subaru, Louis. We know Oni-san's ploy. We had been Oni-san after all. That's why we know what Oni-san is going to do. However, we won't let you sue. Subaru. You. Louis, return what was eaten. Absolutely never. After all, this is our lifeline. If we lose this, then Oni-san will be able to kill us. As long as this isn't returned, Oni-san won't kill us. It's the other way around, completely the other way around. In order to not be killed by Oni-san, we cannot return this. That's why you know W. Howling with a loud voice, Louis turned her palm towards Subaru. It's not as if something was being fired from the fair palm held out. However, Louis' aim materialized in a different form. Subaru's field of vision steadily distorted into white. A change was yielded in the Hall of Memories. It commenced constricting the world, having detected the presence of a foreign substance and seeking to eliminate it. As a result, Subaru's existence was extracted out. Louis, enough. We don't want to be in the same place as Oni-san for even a second. Impossible in terms of physiology. Impossible in terms of life. Impossible in terms of destiny, you see. That's why, disappear. The ones who will eat Oni-san will be Oni-chan and Nick-sama. Either of them can do however they please. No thanks from our side. Louis' decision, infuriatingly enough, was the best possible option for her. Banishing Subaru from the Hall of Memories and sending him back to reality. And entrusting opposing him to her siblings Lei and Roy instead of herself. If the Sin Archbishops of Gluttony could choose to share or not to share a meal, then Louis would be able to part ways from the worst platter named Natsuki Subaru. Whether her siblings would bear the same anguish as herself or not, that itself was something her current self did not know. Subaru, GH! It was difficult to hold out. With not a single thing to latch onto, and with even the ground to stand firm on becoming vague, Subaru was hopelessly the weaker side in this hall of memories. Subaru, if you don't like me doing it, then if you settle this by yourself. Louis, we won't go along with that, Sue. Even if you try to make us kill you, it's futile. You intend to take us to task through return by death. We won't let you. Oni-chan and Nick-sama will utterly eat away Oni-san. That is the condition for our victory, Tsu. Unraveling her fangs, Louis scowled at Subaru, who tried to hold his ground. He could no longer oppose her will. Comprehending that, he let in a deep inhale. Afterwards, Subaru's black eyes directly pierced through Louis. Eek! Subaru. If your siblings are your final rope to rely on, then I understand. I will slash that rope and make you pay. You'd better remember this, Louis Arneb. With a single finger pointed towards the frightened, cowering Louis, he resumed. Subaru, everything distressful, everything painful, bear all of it by yourself. Don't run away from the memories. Humiliation and repentance were all memories necessary to shape the current oneself. Its entirety had become food for the human named Natsuki Subaru. And the Natsuki Subaru constructed by its entirety had reached this point after having stockpiled many a death. If Natsuki Subaru was amazing, then that was because humiliation and repentance let him be so. Subaru. With that being said, I don't really want even a part of that shame. That was what Subaru whispered whilst being expelled out from a space to its edge, which wasn't present in the world, with his field of vision turning white as if nothing had been there. And the Hall of Memories came untied. The scene changes. And within the Hall of Memories, wherein the form of the dreadful lunatic had been erased, Louis Arneb took in a deep, shivering inhale and confirmed her own pure life. Louis. Her throat, shivering, her lungs, shivering, her heart, shivering, her soul, shivering. Even Louis, who had indulged in every possible variety of memories, couldn't comprehend an existence that repulsive. What was truly frightening about that thing was its inconceivable spirit. Louis, WHY. Whether she could remain as per ordinary, she did not know. Louis had become a part of that thing, and prior to that had eaten that thing's memories thoroughly down to its roots. Slowly crunching the memories without exception, she had masticated them. That deed itself was roundabout, as if peeling off the layers of an onion's skin one by one, a code of action separating that which yielded new life upon each instance of death into greater than 20 sections. Before having experienced return by death, that deed of dividing those memories into several portions, then eating them, was something that made her heart pound with the notion of it being a new experience. But now all she found was incomprehensible fear. In the first place, why couldn't the memories prior to the occurrence of the summoning into the different world, or whatever, be robbed? Originally, the power of the authority of gluttony was supposed to eat away all of the memories of the subject until the moment of birth. Yet, what could be robbed from that thing were merely the memories of this 1 year. As if Odd Lagna did not assess the memories previous to that, abhorred them, or otherwise, stranger. Listen, isn't this a bit from what was supposed to be? Louis. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the hall of memories supposed to have been left alone, and Louis turned around, astonished. However, her doubts were immediately dispelled. The one who stood before Louis' line of sight, who had turned back, was Louis, us. Louis, that's right, us. Because we got the short end of the stick, it's us who had been waiting here in vain. Which one will play the trial version of the greatest life by becoming Oni-san? Was the play environment properly arranged? Came here to report that, is it? Whilst saying so, smiling at Louis was the existence exactly the same her Louis. Dividing the witch factor originally supposed to be one into two, having segregated the soul despite being the same personage, in the utmost correct sense, another one of herself. The greatest factor which made that possible must be that Louis did not fear the deterioration of herself, an existence of mere soul, devoid of a flesh body. That Louis, who was one more of oneself, did not share that personal experience unlike Louis. That is why Louis found the genuinely smiling form of Louis to be unordinarily distant. Louis, what happened us? Making such an expression, huh? First of all, what about Oni-san? Being here means, got into this place by reading the Book of the Dead again, no? Louis. Louis. Besides, what's with this being all crouched since earlier? Why be so curled up? Hey, the goal was properly accomplished, right? Though we failed on this end, we were supposed to have fulfilled the role, isn't it? Amazing, got in pretty cleanly, huh? Oni-san, geez, didn't take notice at all. Of the us inside of himself. Clasping her hands energetically, Louis reminisced the forbidden tryst. Of course, unneeding of a necessity to mention it, Louis was aware of that affair. It referred to back when the Hall of Memories got connected to when thinking of investigating the way of capturing the atrocious swordsman, Reed Astria. Louis then once again came in contact with that thing, which had forgotten anything and everything, and had the circumstances permitted, intended to eat that thing including Louis, who was a witch factor. Though it was an experiment to see if that thing's authority, including the integrated witch factor, could possibly be successfully plundered by doing that. It failed due to an unexpected hindrance. She surely never mused having to taste a counterattack by one of the eaten memories. However, reflecting on it now, had the hindrance not entered there, then Louis might have become one with that thing by this time. With that thing, Louis. Hey, what happened us? Talk about various more stuff, let us hear it. Saw it right, heard it right, scented it right, touched it right, tasted it right. Natsuki Subaru's authority, eh? Louis. Don't mention that thing's name. Louis. Sue. Resuming her merry words, Louis stretched her hand. The moment that arm attempted to touch her own shoulder, Louis shook off the arm in accompaniment of exasperation. Violently, powerfully, with as much rejection as possible, she did, to the arm of her literal other half. Louis, huh? Naturally, unbeknownst to the meaning behind her other half's action, bafflement was yielded forth in Louis' facial expression. However, Louis did not possess the leeway to look back onto that expression of Louis. Louis hugged the shoulder others had tried touching and stepped backwards whilst shaking her head in rejection. Louis, no, don't touch, don't come near. She was astonished by her own cognizance. However, it was her own sensation. It would not turn traitor, like the hell named oneself. She comprehended. Louis, before her eyes, who possessed the same face as herself, who had undergone the same experiences as herself. The existence, supposed to understand her soul at present, it was someone other for Louis. It was unknown what others will do. They will not protect Louis. They could become Louis' cause of death. Baleful enemies who would not but kill Louis who did not want to die. Louis, don't come. Don't come near, don't come near, don't come near, don't come near, Sue. Don't come close, don't touch us. Louis, hugging her own body, she was unable to do anything but react in exactly the same way as when she had confronted that thing. For Louis, who had continued molding herself through the memories of others in this space, devoid of the freedom to even look at a mirror, the sense of foreignty she felt towards Louis, who possessed the same face as herself, was stronger than the unskillful others. Witnessing Louis repeat denial and rejection like this, Louis reciprocatively shifted her gaze along with the hand that had been shaken off. And Louis, what's with that? Pertaining to Louis' rejective response, Louis clenched her hand that had been shaken off. She then looked down onto Louis with a terribly thirstful voice, biting and clanking her fangs. Louis, what's with that? What's with that? What's with that? What does this mean? With what purpose? With what idea? With what plan? With what thought? Hey, Louis, EK Tsu. Louis, this is different from what was supposed to be Tsu. What happened us? What's with that reaction? Attitude? Response? The rejected Louis enraged, closing in towards the huddled Louis. Crouching down before Louis, who knelled her throat upon the vigor, Louis grasped the hair of her cowering other half, subsequently making her raise her face through sheer force. The two, with the same faces, glared into each other, at a distance that their breaths entangled. Louis, it sure is strange. Strange, how strange, isn't it strange, pretty strange, it is strange, as it's strange, quite strange, as it's too strange, as we're saying it's strange. Louis, what about the strategy? The plan went well, didn't it? The plan was to become a factor and get inside Oni-san and put wickedness to work, wasn't it? It was a job really well done. Oni-san was frightened after all. Oni-san completely thought that Natsuki Subaru was the closest person to him. Louis made no response to the plan which Louis recited and its progress. The truth was, Louis and Louis' plans had transitioned smoothly. Louis experienced return by death inside Subaru and stimulated the separation of Subaru and Natsuki Subaru by putting wickedness to work. And whilst staying behind in the Hall of Memories, Louis shall eat Subaru, who had differentiated himself from Natsuki Subaru, and make the authority her own belonging. A single step had remained, and even if that had not went well, Louis, no matter how many times, tens of times, hundreds of times, the arrangement was to challenge until the authority of return by death has been looted, isn't it? What's wrong after failing a bit? It'll be fine by stealing Oni-san's memories again, and trying again no matter how many times it takes. Let's mutually exchange roles and challenge, no matter how many times it takes. Failures can be recovered from. The one to assimilate as a witch factor, and the one to stand by in the Hall of Memories. She had intended to accomplish the complete extortion of the authority by exchanging roles and regardless how many times it would take, without getting tired of it. And yet, to do something like rejecting us, what happened, Louis knew uotsu. Louis, With strength poured into the arm which had grasped her hair, Louis gave rise to a screech in agony and fear. Afterwards, she shoved the chest of Louis, who was before her eyes, making her other half rumble in pain and fall onto her back. Mutually glaring at each other with eyes of disbelief, a painful silence fell upon the white world. And whilst Louis remained silent, Louis widened her eyes and, Louis, it can't be, aiming to monopolize the authority. Louis, since the authority of return by death was obtained successfully, erasing Oni-san immediately and aiming to enjoy it by oneself, leaving us as is, too. Louis, that's wrong, Sue. Louis bellowed before the frozen Louis, who had painted a picture of repulsive misgivings in astonishment, in shock. That was not true at all. It was improbable. She had not thought in the slightest bit to monopolize this. Something like this, if it was possible to throw it away, then she wished to throw it away. However, she could not do so, for these were the memories of nobody but Louis Arneb. Oneself's own memories were impossible to be erased, impossible to be stolen, impossible to be taken in and out. Everything distressful, everything painful, bear all of it by yourself. Don't run away from the memories. Louis, eek. So she had been told by that thing just previously. What was experienced by oneself, what path was walked by oneself, could not be erased. Having certainly taken birth within Louis, that was the history of Louis Arneb herself. Louis, this is no joke, Sue. Something like this, as if it can be excused. She had wanted to become happy. She had wanted to attain a joyful life that was hers alone. However, the life solely belonging to her which she had attained in an unexpected form smashed Louis, redacted, heart into pieces, and wounded her to an irrecoverable extent. Louis was unable to comprehend, Louis fearing the wounds and abrasion of her heart. Louis, As if we'll let someone like you monopolize our means to become happy. Louis, that's wrong. That's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's ro-o-o-o-n-g. That's not it. That is not it. That's definitely not it. Louis, as if we can believe that, we never thought that we'd be betrayed by us. As expected of us, isn't it us? That's right. We get it, we get it. We do get it. Louis, no, don't get it at all, don't get it at all, don't get our feelings at all, Sue. Louis, no, do get it indeed. After all, it is about us. That's right. If it's for the sake of becoming happy, then we'd be willing to do anything, and must do anything. Joyfulness is something which keeps on declining by the slightest thing. Louis bounced and joined her hands before her slim chest. And with a magnificent, broad smile, she directed a sidelong glance towards Louis, who articulated her rejection in a tearful voice. Louis, what if we carelessly schemed wickedness? If that's done to us by us who have attained return by death, then no matter how much the struggle, we can never win, isn't it? Amazing. Really put thought into it, isn't it? Louis, don't want to die, we don't want to die. Don't want to die, don't want to die, don't want to die, Louis, don't say such utterly obvious lies. Don't want to die? Why, how come? If it's unneeded, then hand it over to us. What a filthy desire to monopolize. Can't even think that it's us. Louis. From Louis' words, she was repudiated being the same existence. At that instant, Louis felt like she heard the note of something inside of her thirsting, cracking, shattering. She did know what had been present inside of her which shattered. Though she did not know, Louis, Natsuki Subaru belongs to us, this thieving cat. Despite not knowing what that thing was whatsoever, it was condescendingly called as a belonging. Even though the only one who truly comprehended what thing was only herself. How arbitrary a thing to say. The only one who truly comprehended that thing was herself alone. Louis. The only one who understands Natsuki Subaru is us, this foolish girl. That thing was fearsome. That thing was repulsive. That thing was abhorrent. That is why. Louis, let us taste it too, Sue. Louis pounced, advancing in order to purloin the memories which made Louis Louis. To hand that over would resort to give the meaning of it being the death of Louis Arneb. Giving the meaning of death. Giving the meaning of the world witnessed by that thing. Louis. Sue. Screamed. Screaming, she screamed. Continuing to scream, whilst resuming screaming, whilst continuing to raise a screaming voice, don't want to die. An exceedingly fierce, meaningless conflict commenced in the Hall of Memories. A conflict with nobody watching, nobody interested. Commenced and ended. A conflict devoid of victors. The scene changes. Stranger, ice brand arts. The instant those words were fired, she tightly gripped a sensation born within her palm and swung it completely. What had been generated in her hands was a longsword shaped with ice, and its cutting ability was far greater than that of some incomplete iron sword. Though she had only just begun practicing the sword, moving her body was her specialty. Swinging the ice sword atop the extended line, she attempted to land a fatal blow upon her opponent whilst sealing off his roots to escape. However, stranger, you're doing it, but this is too far from being enough to land, GZ. Stranger, hick. The enemy, with his long hair waving about, evaded her fatal strike by seemingly crawling on the ground. Glaring with his sharp cuspids unraveled was the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, who named himself as Lay Baton Catos. Upon hearing the name of Sin Archbishop, something akin to dislike swelled up within her. That was because approximately a month ago, clashing with a great number of Sin Archbishops in the Watergate City Pristella had led to a large number of settlements, as well as a large number of settlements being delayed, at any rate, led to mountain worth of grave happenings. Plentiful emotions of sadness or bitterness had been borne forth. Their elimination or solution had yet not been achieved. That is why everyone was doing their best, and yet. Stranger, why do you all act like this, and Lay, why indeed, why we wonder, why is it why must it be why we wonder? Why is it what we certainly wonder, why must what be why? Why is what why is why a? His teasing words possessed no echo of seriousness. Her opponent did not intend to give a proper response. Sensing that, she powerfully stiffened her cheeks. Being able to converse would be the best. However, should the opponent not comply with conversation, then she shall not hesitate any further. That resolute exchange certainly occurred with clarity during that moment. Stranger, icicle line! Lay, wow. Accompanying the chant, a sound of freezing space echoed from her rear. Countless ice stakes with sharp tips were borne in the air, signifying they were ready to be fired. Gazing at that, Lay's composure, yet, remained unchanged. With no strong feelings for that, she merely commenced the offensive abiding by her frozen fighting spirit. The count of the fired ice stakes was close to, but no greater than 100. Submerging the aisles seemingly constructed of stone, the dust of the ice which had impacted the floor, the walls, the ceiling fluttered about, and the space frozen white brought immense damage upon the one who had been immensely hit. However, Lay, sorry One-san, we're tired of seeing that. Is something we won't say, but we have seen it. See, because we are genius after a LL, we don't think an attack that has already been seen once will hit. Swinging the daggers fastened to both of his hands, Lay laughed, having outdone the terrific attack of ice. She inhaled in astonishment, witnessing his talent and skill, and having withstood and outdone it as a matter of fact as he stood completely unwounded. However, if he had outdone it once, then twice, thrice, if that still won't work, then even more. Lay, you're thinking you'll be able to win if you do it 100 times. It will not reach through even after you do it 1,000 times, you know. Stranger, then I'll just do it 10,000 times. I won't let you go where everyone is. Lay, Ahahatsu, well that sure is a large scale. Good gracious, how outrageous. Putting his hand on his forehead, Lay let out a sigh divided into disgust and irritation. Whilst viewing that, she quietly abided by her own words. Though she had pronounced those words whilst simply going with the flow, she must abide by them. Thus, the moment she attempted to step ahead and fulfill that, stranger, Lay baiting Kato's. From the rear echoed a voice in the aisle that was neither hers nor Lay's, leading her to thoughtlessly halt her feet. Upon looking back after being immediately lured by the voice, a shadow showed itself by the corner of the path and leapt into her field of her vision. That was a black-haired youth with a somewhat nasty look of eyes. He rushed into the battlefield with a gallant expression and was looking at Lay and herself, who were sparring in the aisle. Stranger. Ah, suddenly, oh no, was the thought which surfaced in her innermost mind. Though she must say something, a vacuum was born in her words. This was due to the various emotions which overflowed in face of the rushing youth. However, before bafflement was yielded in front of the youth, she hurriedly moved her lips. Stranger, it's dangerous, so wait. You may not know about me, but he is the enemy. Leave this place to me, even though you may not know about me. She wished for him to leave this place and for him to not think of herself much. At the very least, right now at the present instant, should she begin considering things aside from fighting, she would certainly burst into tears and cry. She did not wish to show her weak side like this and trouble everyone. And yet, stranger, it's all right, Emilia-tan. The youth who had rushed in called her name. Emotions she could not concern herself with, like anxiety, like sorrow, strummed and sprang within her chest due to simply that, for which she tried her best to make sure they did flow out. After all, Subaru, my name is Natsuki Subaru, Emilia-tan's one and only knight. Right now, Emilia's heart was beating with such warmth,